Hi. Yeah. You ready? Okay. Sorry. What are we doing? Yeah. Hi, everyone hear me? My name is Greg Weisman. I am the one of the supervising producers, the story editor, one of the writers, one of the voice actors on The Spectacular Spider-Man, which is here celebrating its 10th anniversary. Hi. I'm Victor Cook. I'm the other supervising producer and supervising director of The Spectacular Spider-Man. Nice to see you guys. So we're going to open it up first. We're going to show a little clip reel we did to remind you about the show. Can you go full screen?
Gentlemen, the spectacular! Ladies and gentlemen, the spectacular Spider-Man! With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Excuse me, can I come in this way, or do I have to break my own window? This always works in the cartoons! Television so cannot trust. School. What you call me? Lightning Bud? No, not that. I'm Electro. I'm the vulture. I called you a buzzard. You can't even get the name right. You want some aloe vera for that bird? Who are you? How's about Shocker? Call me Rhino. Appreciate the help, fanboy, but keep clear. You're not pretty enough to say it twice. Right. Second one for me.
She has a wonderful personality.
Call me Dr. Octopus.
Name's like someone is so getting the look.
In my life, I've been called many names. My favorite is Tombstone. Hey, Mr. Sandman. Chill.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
Woohoo! I'm wearing it now. We all wear masks, Spider-Man. The one and only. Got it. But which one is real? The one that hides your face, or the one that is your face? Hey, wall crawling's my shtick. Hey, you start spinning the web and I'll shoot. Live does not equate with clever, Spider-Man. Ooh, nice banter. Don't you mock me, boy. I mock. I'm a mocker. Also a puller, a tugger, a yanker.
Oh, you better not get your goop in my hair.
I'm giddy as a schoolgirl. Oh, mustard!
It's Randy, right?
Very. Come on. Let's go to bed.
Take off your shirt, dear. Dr. Bromwell gave me a ride.
Ooh, my kitty sense of burn. Okay, wow. Just wow. He can quit it out. But he can't say yes. You planned this? Man, you're an evil mastermind. I make it a rule not to partner with anyone green. Or, psychotic. School. With great power comes great responsibility. You ever shut up? Sorry, no. My fans expect a certain amount of quippage in every battle.
Okay, we also have the very first animation we showed back in 2007, about 6 months before the show came out. We storyboarded it without even having the final design set yet, because for like about 3 months it was just going back and forth with Marvel and Sony and everybody involved. Hasbro, we have a show where he's a teenager. He gets picked up by Flash Thompson. He's called Peter Parker, and the toy company say make him look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It didn't make sense. But we went ahead and storyboarded it, and just before shipping, we finalized the designs, and this is what we showed back in 2007. Hold on a second. Let me see. There it is. Okay.
How I Spent My Summer Vacation by Peter Parker. can sum it up in one hyphenated word. Spider-Man. Talk about your ultimate rush. Okay, so summer's over. Big deal. Are things really gonna change that much?
So long we doing. You got more? You want to show another one? You guys want to see another one? Yeah. All right. So what I have is, let's see, I have part of Act 3 of the first episode.
Okay. Target sighted at last known location. Boys, let's squash us a bug. Trick or treat! I mean, you are celebrating Halloween in September, right? Or am I not one to tell? Strangest darn gig big man's ever slid our way. We're flying with the freaks now, boys. I got no idea what that big bird's about, but I am mighty glad he's keeping our bug busy. Target locked. Oh, my spider senses. Thanks, Dan. You're up. Look back. If you needed a breath, man, you just had to ask. Oh, that's not good. Boys need a workout. Now, no turning tail. Seriously, who are you guys? I think we lost them. Nothing running, but there's this vulture guy out there, so if we can just postpone. Oh, you're strong. Point taken. But can you do this? Didn't think so. Now, I know you can tear right through that. I wouldn't recommend it. Son, you're making the enforcers look bad. I can't have that. You will apologize! I won't! Man, this is a sweet ride. That sunroof come standard? Why did you defend that Steve Osborne? Uncool! Do you know what these spider suits cost? Never fought anyone like this group of bozos. Only one thing I know for sure. I can't let Harry lose his dad the way I lost Uncle Ben. Surf's up! Woohoo! There, the car park! Go, go! No! This is all your fault! birds, one stone. Where'd that varmint get to now? Did you really think you could hide from me there? My funding! I can't steer! Yeah, but you're still airborne. How does that work exactly? No, Vulchi, you're humming. You do us both! You so have not been paying attention. Well, 3 out of 4 ain't bad, especially on bizarre bad guy night. Now, if I can just get my shoes.
You guys want more? Yeah. All right.
Hey, QB, want a slushie? Oh, yeah. Delicious. You are so going down in your dreams. Hey, Gwen. You stand a little company? Oh, look. What did I do to deserve?
Barely said 2 words to me since the you know what. So I get it, okay? I'm not your first choice, but I won't be your second choice either. Skating on thin ice again, eh?
MJ. Yeah, you saw that, huh?
Saw it, heard it. It's so painful. I almost felt it. Look, Tiger, you're one of my favorite guys.
Would you look at her? She's gorgeous.
But you distract too easy. Gwen's got a totally legit gripe. Decide what you want, Pete. Then focus on getting it done.
Don't suppose you'd help a poor, distractible boy sort through all this?
I sort better with Coco.
Sorting Coco coming right up. He's not here.
He's here. I smell him. 2-1. Deploy. That will lure the do-gooder into the open.
Way ahead of you. Ow! Hot! Spider-Man, come out to play! That's probably the least painful part of my night.
Last clip is sort of an extended version of our main title sequence. It's a Q&A at this point. So if you guys have questions about the show, anything at all, yeah, right there.
What's it like working with Keith David?
Great. It's great. Keith only did one episode of Spectacular Spider-Man. He was going to play the role of the big man, also known as Tombstone, for us. I'd worked with Keith for years on Gargoyles, and Keith is a great guy. But then Keith got another job outside of Los Angeles, and we didn't have the budget to record him long distance on Spider-Man. So the amazing Kevin Michael Richardson took over the role of Big Man after the first episode. But they're both terrifically talented guys.
And I got to work with Keith David years later on Stretch Armstrong, so it worked out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're self-moderating today.
Yeah, we're monitoring ourselves. So you're just stuck with me and Vic. Yeah.
Okay, now I can ask my question. Vulture has always been my favorite Spider-Man villain, and Freddy Krueger has always been my favorite horror villain. You can see where this is going. What was it like working with Robert Englund?
It was a blast working with Robert Englund, but let me give you a little backstory on Vulture. Greg had mapped out like season 1. The stuff was like planned out ahead of time. And we did like 3 storyboards, or like 3 or 4 storyboards into the show. And the executive from the toy company showed up and asked Greg and I if our first film could not be the Vulture. And in fact, could we not even have the Vulture be in the show, because kids would think they're fighting their grandpa, you know. And so we had to just sort of gently tell the guy, it's like, you know, the Vulture's going to be in the show. But casting, the voice acting was fantastic. I'll let Greg take over on that.
Yeah, I mean, Robert was terrific. He got a great kick out of doing the show. He was even in our very first Comic-Con panel, and he was great. And then, you know, later in the season, we sort of teamed him up with Dr. Octopus, who was played by Peter McNichol, and it was just great watching Robert and Peter sort of go to town together. And they had very different styles, but Peter's very precise in everything he does, and Robert's very loose. But they both sort of meshed really terrific, and they were great foils for Josh Keaton, who played Spider-Man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Prior to being canceled, do you have any ideas for what season 3 is going to be like?
We had a 5-year plan, and then a plan to do direct-to-DVD movies after that. So our plan was the first season, more or less, the first 13 episodes was
September through up to before spring break.
No, that's the whole 2 seasons.
That's right.
The first season was basically September, October, November. Didn't we end on Thanksgiving? And then season 2 was December, January, and February. I think into March, because we did Valentine's Day, and I think we got into March. And the idea was, you know, this was their junior year of high school, so we had a 5-season plan to take them all the way through high school graduation, and then we wanted to do direct-to-DVD movies to cover his college years. So we would do at least 4 movies, 1 for each year of college, and maybe more than that if they gave us more. And everyone was really on board with that plan, and then things changed. The show did well, that wasn't the problem, but Sony negotiated with Marvel, so complicated, but basically the short version of it isn't that short, but short enough, is that Sony, of course, had the big live-action movies, and for some concession that they wanted from Marvel on the live-action movies, they gave the animation rights to Spider-Man back to Marvel. And what that meant is that Marvel had the rights to do a Spider-Man animated series, but didn't have the rights to specifically do the Spectacular version of that show. Sony couldn't do Spectacular because it no longer had the animation rights, and Marvel couldn't do Spectacular because it didn't have the rights to that version of the character. and there was no way Marvel was going to pay Sony to do Spider-Man. And so instead, and I think also, Marvel was very glad to get their marquee character back, and they wanted to do their own show. And so they did Ultimate Spider-Man, which was a huge bummer for us, but it had nothing to do with the quality of the show or the success of the show, which is small consolation, but a little bit of consolation.
We had just a few little unexpected surprises like that. When we started the show, we were in Kids WB, and then just right after we got word we're doing a second 13 episodes, we found out no more Kids WB.
And we moved to Disney XD. Yeah. So
No, I thought you moved to Nickelodeon.
nope, Disney XD.
What about, sorry, did you have any designs for more villains for the third season down?
We had. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about subsequent seasons, but I will reveal what I've already revealed at other conventions, since all that information is online. We definitely were planning to do Scorpion and Hydro Man, and eventually Carnage. I don't know if Carnage would have shown up in season 3, but we were eventually planning to do Carnage, and Hobgoblin.
Right here?
Do you have any? Do you have any Spider-Man characters like in Civil War and main characters in Spider-Man Homecoming?
No, we had we were just cartoon guys. We had absolutely nothing to do with the live action movies. Sorry.
What we did on our show, and I don't know if it influenced them or not, is we changed some of the ethnicities of the side characters. We made Liz Allen Hispanic. We made Ned Lee Asian. We made Kenny Kingston, King Kong, Chinese Samoan. We did things like that, and we made a really sort of a thin lift Spider-Man, which was kind of at that time new for animation. And so I watched Homecoming. I'm not saying they did what we did.
You guys can come in. It's really okay. Or not, Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Was Sean Galloway always the primary choice for design?
Sean Galloway was always my primary choice. I introduced Sean to Greg and the team. We had worked on Hellboy Blood and Iron, which was I did that just before that, and I actually didn't meet Sean on the project. Sean was the concept designer, and the producer of the Hellboy DVDs decided to have another sort of production designer go over his work and turn it, because Sean was pretty new. And but when I got on Hellboy and looked at the concept stuff, I actually liked it better than the final product, and I just thought I'd love to get that guy and kind of help get him to the point where he can like turn his own stuff. So he was always my choice from the beginning, but
But Marvel really wanted us to audition design artists.
It was that way for actors and music. They want choices, so it's kind of an American Idol audition process.
Well, it's no, but it's more anonymous.
Yeah.
So in other words, we had Sean do designs, and a bunch of other people did designs. We picked 3 or 4 ones that we liked the best, but we both, and I didn't know Sean at all, but we both preferred Sean's work, and we showed these 3 or 4 choices out of probably like 10 or 15.
Kind of would narrow down. It came down to 2, and then ultimately we all decided on.
Everyone agreed on Sean. The casting process was very similar. Marvel and Sony insisted on having choices for the lead actors, and we had auditioned everyone from Aunt May to obviously Peter Parker / Spider-Man to Flash and Gwen and Mary Jane and J. Jonah Jameson, and not so much the villains. The villains were sort of cast after the fact, but all the sort of supporting characters. The main exception was Norman Osborn, Green Goblin. Initially, I wanted one actor to play all Harry, Norman, and Green Goblin, and that didn't work out. So we wound up with 3 actors playing those 3 roles, and we had a big meeting where all the Sony executives and all the Marvel executives were coming in with us, and Vic and our voice director Jamie Thomason and I had sort of picked our top choices, and I was ready for a fight. I was ready to fight for these things. So of course we started with Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and they said, "So who do you guys like for Pete?" And I was almost literally like, "Josh Keaton!" Like I was so ready for a fight, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Josh was our first choice too." And Marvel's like, "Yeah, Josh, we like Josh the best." And I was like, "Oh, good, you know. And then they're like, "What about Aunt May?" And I'm like, "Deborah Strang." And they're like, "Yeah, Deborah was our first choice too." And it was like there were no fights whatsoever. And we wound up agreeing on absolutely everybody. On Norman Osborn, I got my second choice, but Alan Rachins was fantastic, and I was fine with that. And
Alan Ratchett, I thought, turned out to be excellent.
yeah, just
Excellent. He could
phenomenal.
not. He couldn't fall though. You know, it was like dramatic acting, but when he had to be dropped or somebody hit him, he just couldn't. He couldn't do that. But other stuff, he was great.
Yeah, and so we just got this terrific cast. And
I want to say, I feel like we were bracing ourselves for almost every choice like that, and it turned out that they agreed with us every step of the way before we
Right.
started production on the theme song, the composers, the actors, all of it.
yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
How long was the symbiote in discussion before it was like written in?
On day one, I blocked out the first 13 episodes. I mean, before Vic had even started. I blocked out the basic things for the first 13 episodes, and the only thing that changed is that we moved Craven back to season 2 and moved Electro up to season 1. And Marvel had one note about Craven, which is that since Craven's going to come hunting Spider-Man, Spider-Man needs to have been around long enough for Craven to find out about him, and that seemed legit. So I had Craven in episode 2, and when you think about it, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it wasn't awful. He'd fought Vulture, and he'd been fighting all summer against regular criminals, so I didn't think it was awful. But when they pointed it out to me that way, it made some sense. So we moved Electro up to season 1, and we put Craven in season 2. Everything else stayed literally exactly as I planned it when I first got the gig.
Yeah, story-wise, the symbiote was planned before we started storyboarding, but certainly design decisions.
Oh yeah, all that.
You know, like that kind of happens as you go. I mean, you know, we had the movie version of the black suit, the comic book version of the black suit, and so just before we started production, we sort of said, let's just have both. We'll start off with the movie version of the black suit, and in the second episode, it starts to unravel, and then by the third episode, it's the classic comic version.
So all those kind of artistic decisions came later, but in terms of like when are we including that character, the plan was always to have it come in on the space shuttle and the symbiote that is, and then have it bond with Peter and then bond with Eddie, and he became Venom. So that was planned from day one.
Regarding the design choices and characters for Rhino and Vulture. Vulture originally had a green suit. Greg obviously had, or no, not Greg, sorry. Sean, yeah, sorry. Sean obviously had some input with the Marvel Knights design instead of the classic green.
Well, what Sean did is he really did the way he draws, he kind of did the Ditko designs. Like if you look at J. Jonah Jameson, it's basically Ditko's design filtered through Sean's sensibility he added the soul patch. And he did that for all the characters. And his original Vulture was very much like what you saw in the 60s, you know. That meeting I mentioned earlier with the toy guy, it sort of sprang from that we were going to sort of modernize the costume.